Names to avoid are Claire, James, Robert, Tyler, Diane, Noah, Greg, Sasha, Vivian, Marcus, Walter, Petra, Nora, Elliot, Leonard, Mins Park, Kevin, Stephanie, Patricia. Let me write the new story now. 83 people were seated around white draped tables in a restored farmhouse venue outside of Nashville when my husband pushed back his chair and picked up the microphone without asking anyone's permission. He didn't tap the glass. He didn't smile first. He just stood there with the kind of quiet that makes a room stop breathing and said, "Before the toasts begin, there's something I need everyone here to understand." People were still whispering about what had happened 2 hours earlier. My mother's chair had scraped the hardwood floor during the vows. My brother had followed her out. The door had clicked shut behind them with the specific softness of someone who wanted you to feel their absence without giving you the satisfaction of a slam. My husband looked around the room. Then he looked at me. I had my hands folded in my lap so tightly I could feel my wedding band pressing into the finger beside it. "I'm Audrey. I'm 32. I'm a physical therapist at a rehabilitation center in Brentwood, Tennessee. The kind of work where you help people relearn how to walk after their bodies betray them. I've spent 8 years learning how to be patient with pain, how to read what someone needs before they can name it, how to stay steady when the person in front of you is falling apart. I did not know how to do any of that for myself. Not until recently. My brother Cole is 28. He's the kind of person who makes everything look effortless because someone has always quietly absorbed the effort he refused to make. He surfs, he snowboards, he does long-haul motorcycle trips through national parks, and posts about them to 12,000 followers who do not know. Our mother calls me every time he needs money and frames it as a family situation. Growing up, I was the one who studied while Cole charmed his way through school. I was the one who got a scholarship while my parents co-signed Cole's car loan at 23 and called it an investment in his future. I was the one who worked weekends through graduate school while my parents floated Cole's rent when his photography business didn't take off. I called it normal for a very long time. That's the thing no one talks about, not the favoritism itself, but how long you can convince yourself it isn't happening. My mother never said she loved Cole more. She said he needed more support. My father never said I mattered less. He said I was the strong one, and he meant it as a compliment. When my fiancé, Ben, and I got engaged, we chose our venue fast, not impulsively, strategically. We picked the second Saturday in May for the weather, the light, the fact that Tennessee in early May is the closest thing to a perfect postcard that actually exists. We put down a non-refundable deposit. We mailed save the dates 8 months out. I made a shared planning folder that Ben called aggressively organized and I called necessary. My mother cried when we told her. Good tears, or what I thought were good tears. She said the venue sounded beautiful. My father said he'd contribute to the catering and I almost cried myself because it felt like a version of him I hadn't seen in years. For about 3 months, everything held together. Then my mother called on a Wednesday morning while I was eating breakfast before a 7 a.m. shift. Her voice had that particular brightness to it, not happy exactly, more like someone who has rehearsed the tone they're about to use. "So," she said, "Cole's been planning something." I put down my coffee. He finally booked that trip he's been talking about, the one to Costa Rica. I waited. He got this whole package, a surf and yoga retreat. Private lessons, beach cabana, the whole thing. She paused. "You know how hard those spots are to get." I asked when. She said the dates like she was reading a weather report. May 9th, due the 16th. My wedding was May 10th. I didn't respond fast enough and she filled the silence quickly. I know the timing is a little tricky, but you know Cole, when he commits to something, he really commits. And these retreats, they have cancellation penalties. I set down my fork. I remember looking at my refrigerator, at the save the date magnet I'd stuck there as a joke, like a reminder to myself that this was real. "Mom," I said carefully, "the invitations are already out. The venue is booked. We have 83 people coming from 4 different states." She made a soft sound, sympathetic and immovable at the same time. "Well," she said, "maybe you could look at pushing it a weekend." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because some part of me had been expecting this and still somehow hadn't prepared for it. "We lose the deposit if we move," I said, "and the venue may not even have another date open." She said, "Well, you don't know until you ask." I said, "Mom, I'm not changing my wedding date for Cole's surf trip." There was a pause that felt like a door slowly swinging shut. Then she said, "You know how excited he was about this, and I just think it would mean a lot to him if the family could be flexible." Flexible. The word landed flat and strange. I thought of every time I had been flexible. The birthday dinner I rescheduled because Cole had a thing. The holiday I drove 4 hours to my parents' house alone because Ben's family needed him and Cole had already booked plans, and someone had to be there. The raises I didn't celebrate because it never felt like the right time when Cole was in the middle of some crisis. "I'm not moving it," I said. She hung up before I did. My father called 3 days later. He did not ask how I was doing. He said, "Your mother told me you've been difficult about the dates." I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the rehab center on my lunch break. I remember staring at the steering wheel. "I haven't been difficult," I said. "I said I won't change my wedding date." He let out a breath like I'd disappointed him with a grade. "You have to understand," he said. "Cole paid for this trip. He's excited. It's not like he booked it to be inconsiderate." "Then he shouldn't have booked it on my wedding weekend," I said. "The save the date went out 8 months ago." My father's voice shifted, not louder, colder. "You've always had trouble seeing past your own perspective, Audrey." I felt that sentence go into me like a splinter. I'd heard some version of it my whole life. "You're too sensitive. You take things personally. You make everything harder than it needs to be. All of it code for, stop noticing what's happening to you." I said, "I'm not changing the date." He said, "If you're going to be this rigid, don't be surprised if we decide this isn't something we can support." I asked him what that meant. He said, "It means maybe we won't be there." I held the phone against my ear for a moment. I could hear the parking lot outside my car, someone's engine, a door. Then I said, "Okay." And I hung up. I told Ben that night while we were making dinner. I was cutting vegetables and my hands were moving on autopilot, and I just said it out loud, flat, like I was reading from a document. My parents might not come to the wedding, because Cole booked a surf retreat on the same weekend and I wouldn't move the date. Ben stopped what he was doing. He didn't say anything dramatic. Ben is an actuary. He thinks in terms of risk, probability, what the numbers actually say versus what someone is telling you the numbers say. He listened to everything I said, and then he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "How did Cole afford a retreat like that?" "Those packages aren't cheap." I shrugged. I said, "My parents probably helped him. They always do." Ben's expression didn't change exactly, but something behind his eyes shifted, the way it does when he's running calculations I'm not fully seeing yet. He said, "Do you remember the account your grandparents set up for you?" I put down the knife. My grandparents on my mother's side had opened a savings account for me when I was in college. My grandmother had mentioned it once. It was meant to be a cushion for a big moment, a wedding, a down payment. She said, "We want you to have a start that's actually yours." I'd never asked to see the balance because in my family, asking to see financial things was treated like an accusation. My mother had always managed it. She said she'd let me know when it was time. I'd never thought too hard about what time meant. I was busy. I trusted them. Or I thought I was trusting them. Ben said, "Do you know what's in it?" I said I didn't. I said my mom handles it. He nodded once, slowly, and said, "I'd like to look into that." I told him it was fine. I told him my family wouldn't do anything like what he was implying without quite saying. He looked at me gently and said, "I know you believe that. I just want to make sure it's true." I let him look. I don't know why I did. Maybe because some small cold part of me already suspected. The same part that had felt my mother's voice on the phone and thought, she already decided. She decided before she called. Ben is methodical in a way that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. He went through old paperwork I hadn't touched in years. A letter from my grandmother that referenced the account. A tax form I had signed when I was 24 because my mother put it in front of me and said it was routine. He called the institution listed on the account documentation. He spoke to 3 different people in the span of 2 weeks, asking quiet, specific questions in the voice he uses when he already knows the answer he's looking for. One evening, he came to find me where I was sitting on our back porch and sat down next to me and opened his laptop. He said, "I found the transfer." I looked at the screen. It was a bank statement, clean and factual the way financial documents always are, indifferent to what they mean. Amount, $54,000. Date, 7 months before our wedding. Recipient, an account in Cole's name. Memo, family support. I stared at it until the numbers started to feel abstract. Then they stopped being abstract. I said. And then I didn't finish the sentence. Ben said quietly, that account was structured in your name, Audrey. Your grandparents' attorney confirmed it. It was designated for you. The porch felt very still. The neighbor's dog was barking somewhere down the street. I thought about my grandmother sitting across from me at her kitchen table when I was in college, saying, "You work hard. We see it. We want you to have something that's yours." They took it, I said. Ben said, and they gave it to Cole. I should have driven to my parents' house. I should have called and screamed. I didn't. I sat on the porch and breathed and felt something inside me go very, very quiet. Not the quiet of acceptance, the quiet of clarity. Ben showed me the rest. He had found an email chain, not by hacking, not by any method that required drama. My mother had forwarded him an email 3 years ago about holiday logistics and had accidentally included a thread below it she didn't mean to send. He'd never opened the full thread until now. He'd never had reason to. The thread was between my mother and Cole. Cole had written, "Just pull it from Audrey's account. She never checks it and she's not going to ask. She's too polite." My mother had written back, "I know. I'll handle it." I read it twice. Not because it was complicated. Because the thing that hit me wasn't the theft. It was the phrase, "She's too polite." They had counted on it. They had built their plan around the specific thing they had trained me to be. I asked Cole to meet me for coffee. Not at the house, not at anywhere familiar. A coffee shop in East Nashville, one of those places with big windows and too many plants, and the kind of ambient noise that keeps conversations private. He came in already smiling, sunglasses pushed up on his head even though it was overcast. He ordered an oat milk latte and sat down across from me and said, "What's up?" Like we were just siblings catching up. I didn't warm up to it. I said, "Did you take $54,000 from my savings account?" His smile didn't disappear immediately. It sort of recalibrated. He set down his cup. He said, "Wow. Okay. Where is this coming from?" I said, "It's coming from a bank document." He leaned back. He said, "You're really going to do this right before your wedding?" I said, "It happened 7 months before my wedding, with my grandmother's money." He crossed his arms. He said that was a family account. Mom managed it. You'd have to talk to her. I said, "I've seen the email, Cole. Your message to Mom. You told her to take it because I was too polite to check." Something moved behind his eyes. Not guilt exactly, more like recalculation. He said, "You're taking this completely out of context." I said, "What's the context?" He said, "I was going through something. I needed the help. You had a stable job. You had Ben. You were fine. You didn't need it the way I did." I said, "It wasn't yours to decide." He shrugged. Actually shrugged, like we were debating the check at dinner. He said, "Look, I'll figure out the money, okay? Can we just not blow up the family over this right now? You got a wedding coming up. Let's just get through it." I said, "Are you still going to Costa Rica?" He paused. Then he nodded. I said, "On my grandmother's money." He said, "I already paid for the retreat." I looked at him for a long moment, at his sunglasses on his head and his expensive latte and the complete absence of anything resembling shame. I said, "Enjoy the trip." I picked up my bag and walked out into the gray Nashville morning, and the air smelled like rain, and I thought, I've spent my entire life being too polite, and today was the last day of that. Ben and I called an attorney 2 weeks before the wedding. Not a dramatic courtroom kind of call, a practical one. The account had clear documentation. My grandmother's estate attorney had records of the original designation. The transfer had occurred without my knowledge or consent. The attorney used words like unauthorized distribution and civil recovery, and explained what a demand letter could accomplish before anything needed to go further. Ben didn't look satisfied when we left the attorney's office. He looked focused. "There's a difference." He said, "You don't have to do this at the wedding." I said, "I know." He said, "We can handle it quietly." I said, "I know, but I also knew what my parents were going to do, and I knew what silence would mean if I let it stand unchallenged in front of everyone I loved." May 10th came sunny and warm, which felt almost sarcastic. The farmhouse venue had strung Edison lights across the outdoor pavilion and filled it with white ranunculus and the kind of soft greenery that makes everything look like a painting. My best friend Maya helped me into my dress. Ben's mother cried when she saw me in the hallway. Ben's father shook my hand and held it a beat longer than usual and said, Welcome to the family, and I had to press my lips together to keep from losing it right there. 83 people found their seats. My parents were in the second row. My mother in a pale blue dress she had told me about, my father in a gray suit. They had come. I didn't know what to do with that. Part of me had held onto a small hope that they'd show up and something would have shifted in the days since I'd sat across from Cole in that coffee shop, that maybe they'd understood. The ceremony started. Our officiant was a friend of Ben's from college who'd gotten ordained online and spent 3 months preparing something that made 3 people in the front row cry before we even got to the vows. And then, right in the middle of it, not near the end, not at a natural pause, but in the middle of a sentence about commitment, my mother stood up. She didn't say anything. She just stood, and my father stood behind her, and she walked down the side aisle with her chin up like she was leaving a meeting that had run over. My father paused at the end of the row and looked at me with an expression I will never fully be able to describe. Not angry, not sad, more like he was waiting for me to stop this, to call them back, to blink first. I didn't blink. I kept my eyes on Ben. They walked out. The door of the farmhouse opened and let in a brief slice of outdoor sound, then swung shut. Our officiant paused for just a second, then continued. My best friend Maya squeezed my hand from where she stood beside me. I felt Ben looking at me with something solid in his eyes, something that said, I see you, I'm here, keep going. We kept going, we said our vows, we exchanged rings. We kissed while 81 people clapped, and the 2 empty seats in the second row stayed empty, and the afternoon kept moving because that's what time does. At the reception, people tried hard. They were warm and loud and generous with the champagne, and they conspicuously did not mention the second row. Ben's cousin, who had seated himself near my parents and watched the whole thing happen, found me during cocktail hour and quietly said, I'm so sorry. I told him not to be. I was telling the truth. I smiled. I danced. I ate the short rib that Ben and I had spent 40 minutes debating at the tasting. I took photos with people I love. I let myself be happy in the same room as the hurt, because it was my day and I had earned every single thing on that table. Then the toasts started. Ben's best man gave one that was funny and a little embarrassing and exactly right. My best friend Maya gave one that made me cry, actual tears running down my face, the kind you can't stop. And then she sat down, and there was a moment of natural pause where the band started to play softly again. That's when Ben stood up. He picked up the microphone the way he does everything, without announcing it, without making a show of the decision itself. He just did it. Before the toasts are over, he said, there's something I'd like everyone here to understand. The band faded, conversation softened. Forks stopped moving. You saw Audrey's parents leave during the ceremony, he said. I think you deserve to know why. Someone near the back shifted. The farmhouse was very quiet. Ben nodded toward the projector screen where our photo slideshow had been running. The slideshow went dark. Then a document appeared. Clean, institutional, the kind of thing that doesn't editorialize. Amount, $54,000. Recipient, Cole. Date, 7 months ago. Ben's voice stayed even. Audrey's grandparents set aside this money for her, specifically for a moment like this one, a wedding, a home, a start that was actually hers. Those were the terms. Those were the intentions. He let that sit. He said, this transfer happened without Audrey's knowledge, without her consent. And it happened to fund a vacation her brother is currently on. A sound moved through the room, barely audible, the collective intake of 81 people processing the same information at the same time. Ben clicked to the next slide. The email appeared on the screen. Cole's words in black text, a screenshot that didn't need any explanation from anyone. Just pull it from Audrey's account. She never checks it and she's not going to ask. She's too polite. The room went the kind of quiet that feels physical. A woman near the front pressed her hand over her mouth. Someone else let out a breath that was almost a word. Ben's voice softened slightly when he said, Audrey didn't beg her parents to stay. She didn't chase them down. She didn't make a scene or ask anyone to take her side. She simply kept going. The same way she has her entire life. He looked at me. He said, the difference is that now she doesn't have to do it alone. That was when I started crying. Not the slow, polite tears I'd managed through Maya's toast. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere you didn't know was holding pressure. I didn't try to stop them. I sat there in my wedding dress in the farmhouse outside Nashville, And I let myself cry in front of 81 people because my husband had just done the thing my family had spent 32 years training me not to do. Say the true thing out loud. The demand letter went out the morning after our wedding. Ben sent it from his phone while we were still in the hotel. My bouquet dried out in a glass of water on the nightstand, both of us in the kind of quiet that comes after something large has happened and settled. My mother called 4 times before noon. I didn't answer any of them. Her voicemail was long. She said we had humiliated her in front of people who mattered to her. She said she couldn't believe I would use our wedding as a stage for grievances. She said, after everything we've done for you. I listened to it once and deleted it. My father's message was shorter. He said, "You've made your position clear. I hope it was worth it." Cole texted me from what I assumed was somewhere with a beach in the background. The text said, "Seriously?" I wrote back, "Yes." I did not explain further. The legal process was not cinematic. It was paperwork and waiting and 2 more letters and a mediation call where my father's attorney used the phrase, "family discretion" 4 times in 15 minutes. And Ben's attorney used the phrase "documented unauthorized transfer" twice, and somehow that was the one that moved things forward. The restitution came back over 3 months. Not all at once, not graciously, not with any acknowledgement that what had happened was wrong. My mother sent one text during the process that said, "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. The account was restructured and put in my name alone, the way it should have been from the start. My father left me a voicemail in August. Not an apology, more like a statement. He said, "Your mother and I feel this has all been very disproportionate." I thought about calling back and explaining what the word disproportionate meant in this context. Then I thought about how many years I had spent translating my feelings into language that wouldn't make anyone in my family uncomfortable. I didn't call back. I am still not calling back. I think people expect that part to feel like failure. Like the goal is always reconciliation, always the family photo at Thanksgiving, always some version of forgiveness that looks like everything going back to normal. But normal was never actually good. Normal was just a thing I'd been handed and told to hold without asking what was inside it. What I have now is different. Ben and I bought a house in the fall, the kind of house where the kitchen gets morning light and there's a room we're not sure what to do with yet, and the neighbors have a dog who barks at squirrels but not at people, which Ben says is the only kind of dog worth knowing. We used part of the recovered funds for the down payment, and I thought of my grandmother every time I signed a document. I thought of her telling me I had a good head. I thought of her meaning it. There's a photo from the wedding that I keep on my phone. Not the posed ones, not the first dance, not the beautiful shot our photographer took on the pavilion steps. It's a candid from the reception. Ben standing at the microphone, the room around him completely still, the screen lit behind him. I'm at the head table with my hands in my lap and my eyes wet and my spine straight. People sometimes ask if I wish the whole thing had gone differently. If I wish my parents had just come and smiled and let the day be the day. I tell them the truth. Yes, I do. I would have chosen parents who didn't need to be exposed at my wedding. I would have chosen a brother who didn't count on my politeness as a loophole. I would have chosen 32 easier years. But I cannot choose what already happened. What I can choose what already happened. What I can choose is what I do with what's true. My mother trained me to be too polite to ask questions. She thought that was a feature. It turned out to be the thing that finally made me stop. There's a version of this story where I stay quiet, where I swallow the phone call from my mother, fold the hurt into something small, and move my wedding date because the alternative is too uncomfortable to hold. I know that version exists because I lived something close to it for 32 years. I was the daughter who didn't ask to see the statements, the sister who assumed good faith, the woman who got called too polite by her own brother and had no idea he meant it as a strategy. What I've come to understand, not from a book, not from anyone handing me a lesson, but from sitting with the actual wreckage of it, is that there are consequences to every choice, including the choice to look away. My parents made a decision to take what was mine and give it to Cole. That decision had a shape to it. It left a paper trail. It sent a document through a financial institution that recorded a date, an amount, a name. They believed that my politeness would protect them from that trail ever mattering. And it almost did. The thing about integrity, real integrity, not the performed kind, is that it works even when no one is watching. Ben didn't investigate my family's finances because he wanted the confrontation. He did it because something didn't add up, and he was the kind of person who couldn't leave an equation unfinished. That quality, that quiet insistence on what's true, is the same quality that made him stand up at our reception and say the thing out loud. Not for drama, because silence in that room would have meant everyone went home with a lie, and he wasn't willing to let that happen to me. I think about Cole writing that message to my mother. Just pull it from Audrey's account. She's too polite to check. He said it like it was a compliment, like my trust in my family was a personality flaw that conveniently worked in his favor. And for a long time it did. But what he didn't understand, what neither of them understood, is that trust, when it's betrayed at that scale, doesn't just disappear. It transforms, it becomes something colder and more useful. It becomes the reason you finally read the documents, the reason you stop signing things without understanding them, the reason you call an attorney on a Tuesday morning and let paper do what paper does. I'm not angry at who I used to be. She was doing what she'd been taught. She was keeping the peace in a house where peace was kept by the least powerful person, absorbing the most cost. But I am done being that person. And the strange thing is, the moment I stopped, truly stopped, I didn't feel lighter exactly. I felt more solid, like I'd finally taken up the amount of space I was always supposed to occupy. If there's anything I'd want someone to take from this, it's not that families are broken or that justice always arrives on schedule. It's something smaller and harder to say. You are allowed to know the truth about your own life. You are allowed to look at the numbers, read the emails, ask the questions that were framed as rude. Clarity is not cruelty. Accountability is not drama. And the people who trained you to believe otherwise, they were protecting themselves, not you. My grandmother left that money for a moment that was mine. I almost never got to use it. But I did, and the morning Ben and I signed the papers on our house, I thought of her saying, "You have a good head," and I thought, yes. I finally used it.